It is our Friday Wrestling Observer Radio. Garrett and Dave here. How was your Thanksgiving? I know you were really busy with writing the issue.
The biggest issue ever was this week. Which I want to thank Ryan and Bryan, because they helped out a lot. But 34 pages, man.
You couldn't do that in the print era.
Could not. I've had to edit. I would have had to take 10 pages off of this in the print era. Yeah. I mean, which would have been a lot of stuff, a lot of cool stories. But I mean, I really liked the issue. I liked the history stuff and the AEW analysis stuff. I had a lot of fun yesterday. I mean, doing some history stuff and everything. Sad to hear about Mighty Inoue, which was actually the first thing. As soon as I woke up, I got a text. So start working on that one. But overall, yeah, I mean, Thanksgiving was cool. It was really cool. But yeah, it was a long freaking day. That's for sure. I started at 7 a.m. and finished at 3 a.m. getting that issue done. So
Inoue had a heart issue, correct?
Yeah, he had a heart issue. Yeah, 75 years old. He was around. I mean, I remember him, from obviously the 80s and 90s, but more the 80s because he had bigger matches in the 80s. When I was getting, I'd get the tapes from Japan and everything. And I obviously knew of him from the 70s and like in 74, 75, which was that one period where they just pushed the hell out of him. It was like kind of out of nowhere. I mean, it was out of nowhere. He was, IWA or IWE actually was a group in Japan that had network television. They were the number 3 group. I mean, All Japan was probably in 74 the number one. Well, it was definitely the number 1 group in 74 because of Baba, and then New Japan with Inoki would be number 2. And then the IWE, which started before actually All Japan and New Japan, because they started in 72. The IWE started in like 68, I believe, after the TWWA folded very quickly. The IWE started in 68, and that turned into, that they used a lot of European wrestlers, and Billy Robinson was like the king, the world champion and everything like that. And in like early 70s, their top star was Shozo Strong Kobayashi. Had famous matches with, Andre the Giant and Don Leo Jonathan and I think Horst Hoffman and Billy Robinson and Carl Gotch and people like that. And then he defected and went to New Japan for a big feud with Inoki. So they were without their top star. So the decision was made to go with Mighty Inoue, who was probably their best worker at the time. And he would have been, like 26 years old, something like that. But he was never like tag team champion or anything like that. He just was, put in there. They had Billy Robinson win the world title when Kobayashi, was their champion and left. So they put that on Billy Robinson for credibility. He beat Rusher Kimura. And then because Billy Robinson wouldn't lose a match in Japan by pin or submission, what they did was they had a fictitious match with Billy Robinson losing the title in Denver, Colorado to Superstar Billy Graham that actually never happened. The idea being that, they could have done the match. Those two guys were like on top in the AWA at the time, but they had their issues, to say the least. At least Billy Graham had issues with Billy Robinson. I actually never spoke to Billy Robinson about Billy Graham at any length. I spoke to Billy Graham about Billy Robinson at great length on many occasions. And he did not, like if you actually look back in that Billy Graham heyday of AWA, you'll see, he did have singles matches with Billy Robinson. There were a few, but there were not many. And he basically, whenever it would be suggested, as far as doing a program, he'd say, nah, I don't want to do a program with the guy because he, number one, Billy Robinson was like a bully, and really a tough guy, like legit tough guy, like probably would have been, I don't know. I don't want to say he would have been UFC champion, but he might have been. He was, he had a boxing background. He was probably the best submission wrestler in the world. And I mean, there's all kinds of accolades. That's why he was champion in England. I knew a guy who lived in San Jose, Jack Laskin, who was a longtime professional wrestler and was actually one of the guys who taught me about pro wrestling when I was very young. He lived and he worked in England, and when Billy Robinson came to, I mean, Billy Robinson was already in the United States when I met him, and I would talk to him about Billy Robinson. And go, Billy Robinson, he loved the guy, right? He just loved the guy, but just said goes like, he's not a draw. He said he's not a drawing card. This is the Billy Robinson in England, where he wrestled him, and said that, but there ain't a man alive who could have beaten that guy. Just said that, he said, one night, Billy was really nice and he let me do a draw with him, and he said that, that was just how, for whatever reason, but he said, there ain't a guy who could have beaten that guy. But, so Billy hated bodybuilders and he hated football players, and Billy Graham would tell me about how I was both. You know what I mean? And he did not want to work with Billy Robinson, so they rarely wrestled. And so they did this fictitious match. So Billy Graham goes to Japan as IWA World Champion, and his first title match, I believe, he beats Mighty Inoue, which everyone figured Mighty Inoue's undercard guy. Billy Graham is a big superstar. And then they had a rematch, and Mighty Inoue beat Billy Graham, and it was like this giant upset, and everybody was shocked because it wasn't a guy who, he was just kind of it's not like he didn't have main events and tags and things like that, but he was not like a guy you would ever expect to beat Billy Graham at that time. And they won the title, and they just went behind him completely. He had him wrestled Nick Bockwinkel, Ray Stevens, beat them, led to a big match with Vern Gagne. With Billy Robinson as referee. So the idea was you got Vern Gagne, who but at this point is like this all-time legend, and Billy Robinson as referee. So the idea is to make it look, and it's it's on Japanese network TV, and it's to make it look like Mighty Inoue is like the other guy in this match. So he's like our version of or our equivalent, looking like this superstar. And they did double count out, because it was title versus title. IWA versus AWA championship. So, he went to a double count out with Vern, and he was in the ring with Billy Robinson, and he did some double count outs with Billy because Billy wasn't going to put him over. But still, even double count out with Billy in Japan is a pretty big deal. And then he continued to beat people, and then it just didn't work out. He didn't have the charisma, and they pivoted and they wanted to go with Rusher Kimura as the top guy. So Mighty Inoue lost to Mad Dog Vachon, who then immediately lost to Rusher Kimura. And then Mighty Inoue was in the tag team title scene for years in IWE until it folded in 82. And then he negotiated with Baba for a lot of the IWE guys to come to All Japan in 82. And he was, he was a guy on the card who was by that standards, a high flyer. Mighty Inoue and Ashura Haro were called the Japanese High Flyers, which is after the team of Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, the American High Flyers, and held the All Asia tag team titles, and were kind of like a mid-level tag team there, not main event or nothing like that. And he he was around All Japan from 82 until he retired in 97. But through 91-ish, he was like a top junior heavyweight star, wrestled Dynamite Kid and Kuniaki Kobayashi and Chavo Guerrero and, all the top, the Malenkos, all the top junior heavyweights in All Japan of that era, and held the junior heavyweight title twice. Then he retired and became a referee and refereed through 2010. So that was kind of his story. He was patterned very much after Edouard Carpentier. That was his hero growing up, who he actually got to wrestle on several occasions in Japan, when Carpentier went to Japan. Yeah, I mean, he was a guy I saw on TV for years and years and years. He was never, other than that one run, he was never like tippy top superstar. And that, whatever it is, that period of whatever it was, it was under a year when he was on top and he was a tippy top superstar. It was just kind of it's just one of those weird things where you just kind of look at it and go this guy beat Bockwinkel and Stevens and Billy Graham, who were in that era, they were like the biggest stars in the business, wrestled Bruiser and Crusher and all these guys. You kind of like if you saw the Mighty Inoue of the 80s, you'd go like, well, why was he that big in the 70s? And there was like really no reason other than he was probably the best worker they had. And they were, they didn't want the bodybuilder Kobayashi. They wanted something different. So they went with the worker, but the worker didn't have the charisma to pull it off. So they ended up with Rusher Kimura, who was not nearly the worker, but he was more of a, I don't know, bigger guy, tougher guy, did a lot of cage matches, had more credibility with the fans. And so he became the top star in the group. And Mighty Inoue would be like tag team champion, always, with, different partners, Kusatsu and Ashurahara and others.
All right. Well, let's lead with this because we're going to get to your AEW story here in a second. But it is Black Friday today, and this website has two special things going on. We have the Apple Podcast version of the subscription, which is on a 3-day free trial. If you want to go to f4wonline.com/Apple. And if you subscribe on the right 3 days, you might get like a lot of shows in those 3 days. But you get a taste of the podcast. I would subscribe on a day in which Wrestling Observer Radio goes up, so you can hear Bryan and Dave. And then also,
we're doing our show tomorrow night after
Survivor Series.
Yeah, well after, because Brian's going to the show live and he's got to get home.
So yeah, Saturday night, Sunday morning, and then we have the regular website subscription. I believe it is half off for the first month. Yes. So account.f4wonline.com/sign up for the Black Friday code.
Well, I mean, that means you can access every issue, but this issue's got a ton of shit in it, and maybe the next couple of weeks, maybe I'll start doing some year in review stuff or something like. But depending on time, because there's going to be less wrestling, so I'm going to be probably doing more features around Christmas, which would be fun and good.
Yeah. So once again, code for the half off for the first month is Black Friday. All right. So your lead story was the sort of the state of AEW, and you wrote about the pay-per-view. You went back and you watched Ricochet and Takeshita a second time. What were you looking for?
I was looking for why it was so bad, and then I realized it wasn't, because people were telling me about how bad it was, and I thought it was great, and I watched it again, and I mean, I could see it. I mean, it was great, but the problem was that there was no fan reaction, and it's two great wrestlers, and I mean, I just kind of trying to figure out why, and it's people had told me that were in the building. One of the problems, I mean, one person just said, like, one of the big problems of this show is that, the thing that's special is Will Ospreay, and they need to put him on later in the show because he comes out, and then all these guys try to do a similar style, but they're just not as fast, and they're not as crisp, and they're not as over, and you've already seen it, and you can't top it. I mean, there's no way to top that match. I mean, you could fall with a bloodbath, that's different. You could fall with something else, but Takeshita and Ricochet was similar to Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher, but not as good. And it was also a hard crowd anyway, which is has to do with a lot of different things. I mean, the crowd was not. I mean, they weren't hot for a lot of the matches on the show, and that was one of them. So it was kind of like, yeah, well, there you go. But I mean, it's funny because it showed me how much the standards have changed, because that match in a bubble, you transport it back 5 years ago, people would have said, like, that match is freaking incredible, because it would have gotten the reaction and it was incredible, by the standards of 5 years ago. But standards have changed. I mean, you've seen the same thing, the same type of style, and it's not going to move people. That's why people have to do more and more and more. It kind of sucks, because I was watching, with Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. I mean, they were doing stuff that was just giving me like, God, don't do this. And then they would do it, I mean, not in a good way. I mean, it's incredible stuff, but I fear for their long term. Fletcher's 25, so he may not be feeling it that much. Will, I know, is feeling it, and I just, obviously with a guy with that talent and charisma and everything, you want him to be able to go, many more years. And with that, matches like that, as great as they are, there's a limit to what the human body can take, and you can take a lot. I mean, I know plenty of guys, who, were told that they would be in a wheelchair at 30, or that their careers would be over at 30. And like Dynamite Kid actually ended up in a wheelchair at 40, and his career did end young. So you have him. But on the other hand, I was told when, Rey Mysterio, and here's Rey Mysterio, 48, still running around doing, wrestling very, very well. And, a lot of the guys in Mexico that were real high flyers. I mean, some absolutely burned out and ended up in bad shape, and others didn't. It's the luck of the draw. It's like there's NFL players who were, crippled in their early 20s, and guys who played just as hard, who lived normal lives after, no concussion issues or anything into their 70s. Everyone's different, and it's like luck of the draw. Some people don't even, take those big risks. And we've seen how many people in wrestling who didn't take big risks that end up really, really messed up, in their 50s and 60s, and others who took every risk in the world who didn't end up that messed up. But by saying that, the ones who do take those risks, the percentage of them being messed up is certainly going to be higher.
Yeah, I mean, and they may not be, hopefully won't be in wheelchairs, but their body's definitely going to be beat up.
It's impossible to do like 2 decades of pro wrestling, and then get into your 50s and not feel it. It's absolutely, it's just like playing. You can't play like 10 years in the NFL and not feel it later in life. It can't be done. And you have to accept something. There's like, how much do you want to accept? You know what I mean? Do you want everyone to be in a wheelchair? No, that sucks. Okay. Do you want everyone to have concussion issues and CTE? No, that sucks. Let's not have that if we can. But you have to accept in pro wrestling just the nature of it, or in NFL, or in boxing, or in MMA, or any of those things, that there is going to be damage. It cannot, amateur wrestling, it just can't be helped.
Okay, so you and I did not watch this show together. I watched it way late, and my immediate thought was in this Ricochet and Takeshita match. One, I don't know why they promoted it so late. Like, I just assumed it was on the show, and then when we did our show Wednesday before the pay-per-view, I was like, why isn't this on the show yet? So I just assumed it was, and they didn't put it on until really late.
I think it was Thursday late at night when they announced it, and I have no idea why. And it should have been announced. It should have been announced weeks earlier, because quite frankly, at the last pay-per-view and the first TV after the pay-per-view, it was very clear that was where they were going. They were right. That's where all the challenges were. So why wait until, I think one of the things that I don't think it's a good thing is that I think Tony likes to have announcements that he can make like every day or every other day. Yeah. And to keep AEW in the news. And I know a lot of promoters, WWE thinks it the same way. A lot of promoters now are doing that. You release, you want to release something big on Twitter on a regular basis to keep the thing in the public eye. But by doing so, like a match like this is not, it's not announced till Thursday night before a Saturday pay-per-view. And we did that show. And I mean, I knew they were doing the match. Yeah. And people were going like, that match isn't on this show. And it's like, it is on the show, but yeah, they didn't announce it till Thursday night.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with making it feel like an after. I don't know if there's anything there. But when I was watching the show, I saw the Mercedes and Statlander match, and I thought, wow, Mercedes is hitting this woman with every single possible move to get this win. So I thought, okay, so
not just that, but on that match, Mercedes, like, they got the crowd, but if you watch that match, that crowd was not trying to be receptive to Mercedes or that match. I mean, they really had to beat the crowd to death, and finally, and go 20 minutes. And then when it was over, everybody was like, oh yeah, great match. But I mean, it was not the most opportune crowd for that match, even though it worked out. But yeah, I mean, it was like, that match to me was like, okay, you can get this crowd, but you got to go long and you got to work your freaking ass off because this is not an easy crowd. And other than for Will, where they were with them from minute one, and those guys still worked ridiculously hard. And then everyone who followed, I think they were in a Moxley and Orange. It was the main event, but like the other ones, it was kind of like, okay, let's get to the main event.
So it basically, they do the Mercedes match. 2 matches later is Kyle and Will, and Kyle and Will is great, but they almost like the idea of that match was, I have to kill this guy to beat him.
Yeah.
And so you do that, and that's not even the main event. So you tell these 2 stories of like, just, we have to really beat this woman down, and then we really have to beat this guy down. So Ricochet and Takeshita is between that and Swerve and Lashley. So because of what Swerve and Lashley was, they couldn't tell the little man hope spot against the big man story, because that was going to be next. So it's like they were in this weird position of the best match that they could have probably done, probably mirrors Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher a little bit more than anything else. But those stories were already told. So when they went in the ring and they actually slowed it down, I was like, oh, because they have to tell a different story than all of these other stories that are going to be on this show.
Plus they had 20 minutes, which if you are on Saturday morning timing out the show and looking at these matches, you go, we need to give them 20 minutes because Takeshi's freaking awesome. Unfortunately for this crowd, that late in the show, it was a detriment. So they started slow because they wanted to build up. And this crowd, once they started slow, it was kind of like, you know what I mean? And also, they'd seen that freaking the Buddy Matthews match where, those guys pulled out everything they could too. And it was hard for them too. But it's like, it's it was just, whatever.
Well, and it always makes me think. Now I know there's different rules for everything, but I remember when I first met John LaRocca, and like obviously he's influenced by Roland Alexander, who's super old school mentality.
Well, Roland Alexander's total influenced by Roy Shire,
right? So and someone who
complete and total,
because someone who well,
yeah, I mean, Roland grew up with, he's a couple years older than me, and he grew up on Roy Shire, and this is how you do it. And, I'm heavily influenced because it's the first wrestling I saw too, and a lot of the rules. And Roy Shire was a genius booker, and his fundamentals for the 60s were incredible. Of course, it's the 60s is a long time ago. Yeah, but as far as like that style of booking, so I always I look at that too, because that's the booking I grew up on. But you also have to adapt because it's not the 60s anymore.
Yeah, you have to adjust. But John would always tell me, he's like, as a booker, my mentality was the 2 most important matches on the show are the opener to set the tone and then your main event. And so when I watch,
that's not Roy Shire. Roy Shire was 100% built to the main event, and the opener, the opener was the opener. I mean, and look, this was a territory unlike most others in the sense that every match was supposed to be good. The opener was not, let's just do a few holds. I mean, It was like every match is supposed to be exciting, get the people on their feet. Every worker is supposed to be a good worker. We really didn't have many people who were bad. And when they were, they weren't getting pushed and they were gone. But it was very much a progression show in the sense that every match was supposed to be better than the one before, and more important than the one before. And there was no such thing as we got to take the people down after a good match. Like that didn't exist with Roy Shire, and if a match didn't work, you were moved down the card.
And so the only reason I brought that up is because I think sometimes when I watch these shows, I watch a match and I go, oh my gosh, I feel really bad for the match that has to follow this.
I do all the time.
And it's unfortunate because as we are in a clips universe where everything can be clipped out of context and go, look, this thing doesn't work. Well, why didn't it work? Well, how about because the match before it was so great and it had to follow it. And if you put it in in its own thing, it probably works better, which I think was your point with Takeshita and
Well,
Ricochet.
it's been my point with many AEW matches. I mean, we've seen the real we've seen many times, whether it's the Young Bucks or with Pentagon and Phoenix or like pretty much every single Will Ospreay match that's not a main event. And I think he's only had one pay-per-view main event, I think, with the Swerve. But I mean, it's like almost every Will Ospreay match on pay-per-view. A lot of the Kenny Omega matches when he was not in the main event. I mean, and so many of the things they'll have a match in the middle of the show. It tears the crowd down, tears the house down. And then the next people, pay the price legitimately because you can't follow it. And that happens with WWE at times too. They do it more. I think that Tony and WWE do it more to a degree on purpose. WWE would do it completely on purpose. I think Tony tries not to, but he also kind of understands that if I have this great match, I should follow it with something else. Like even with this one, the idea, if you look at it, was Will Ospreay does this great match with Kyle Fletcher. Then we're going to send out Mina Shirakawa and Mariah May to not even do a match, just to do an angle so that they're ready for the next match. The only problem is that when Will Ospreay, when they're doing tombstone pile drivers jumping off the apron onto the ring steps, it's like, how do you follow that? You know what I mean?
It's really hard. Like,
I
understand you want to give the fans every bit of the $50 that they just paid. You don't want to take advantage of the fans, but what happens is they've raised the bar. And I think you had the note, the Fritz von Erich comparison about
the steaks,
steak, right?
Filet mignon.
And so they raise the bar so high with match quality and expectation that anything that falls short is somehow a bad match when it's not really a bad match. It's just not it didn't meet your fantasy expectation of what it could have been.
Yeah. It was tough for those guys, and it wasn't, so, but it's that was a tough crowd. And even Chicago had its hits and misses. I understand that they were actually, I was told that they were pretty good because they were real hot for Collision and they were hot for, Okada and Daniel Garcia. It's 4 hours into the show and the crowd's still very into them. So that's like a good thing. But, they, it still didn't feel like Chicago in the past to me. And it wasn't like it was a small crowd. Chicago had over 5,000 people in the building. This one had, over 10,600 in the building on Saturday. So they had a really good crowd, but it was tough. And, there's the product's cold, that's the reality of it. It's hard for them to sell tickets, even though the last two shows have sold tickets, but it's harder to get crowd reactions because the people going there are going with this mentality that I'm seeing this, I don't want to say second rate because that's not a fair appraisal, but I'm going to see wrestling, but I'm not going to see the best wrestling. And once you do that, you know what I mean, in a big building, it's hard. They're one of the problems with AEW is the success. Maybe the biggest problem is the success of WWE right now. I mean, there's other issues too, but they're issues and they're there, and it's, in a sense it's a struggle. In another sense, I go like, why are you crying for them? They're going to make, whatever it's going to be, $50 million to $70 million in profit unless they, put a lot more in international expansion, which they are. So the profit will probably be a little less than that, but still, I mean, it's going to be, the second most profitable company in the history of wrestling next year. So like, why cry for them? They're, I mean, it's not going to be crowd reactions like they had a year ago or 2 years ago. Probably, it's going to be tough. Are they going to sell as many tickets as they did a few years ago? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But they're self-sustaining and they're very, very financially successful. And, but it's going to be tougher. It's tougher, these same TV shows that people would have been raving about 2 years ago, people are, it's not that great, but it's the standard is very different, and it always is going to be. It's always changing. It's always, and usually it usually does get tougher. That's why wrestling companies have boom periods and then go down, and then they have to wait till this like transcendent star comes in to get it back up again. And if somehow, some way, somebody walks into, but I don't know who that would be, and it being an AEW is going to make it tougher. You can walk into WWE as a major leaguer and turn that thing around, with good angles and good charismatic guys on top. With AEW, it's harder because you're number two. It's really hard when you're number two in pro wrestling. If you look at the history of pro wrestling, in the last 75 years.
So I did an interview today with somebody for their channel, and he asked me, describe your wrestling fandom today. And I said, well, my wrestling fandom is I'm a fan of wrestling, but I don't necessarily root for one company versus the other. I root for business. And it's kind of, like the journalism idea of you don't root for people or necessarily companies. You root for stories. You root for outcomes. And
I guess.
So I was
my mentality is just cover it.
Yeah, no, but from a fandom perspective, like,
of course, I'd rather see everyone sell out, but
right. Yeah. You'd rather see, but you're also rooting for the better that the wrestling industry is, then, your writing is going to be, you're going to cover it. So, and I was thinking like, the best thing for wrestling is for AEW just to get hot again. Like if you have a hot AEW and a hot WWE, then that's the best possible outcome.
And a hot New Japan.
And a hot, all of the companies are being hot. So
yeah. Right now, I feel it's like a hot WWE and a kind of hot CMLL, and then nobody else. And AEW is not like, sometimes when I say cold, it's probably unfair, but it's not hot. Because we've been to the last couple of shows when they're here, and I've been to cold promotions, and neither of those shows were cold shows at all. They were in the middle. It was like definitely not hot, but certainly not dead. It's in the middle.
Yeah. So, like, when I look at this stuff, like, yeah, it's obviously AEW is not hot, but the perspective that I take is, well, how can they get hot? What are the things that they can do? And so that's where my criticism comes from. But a lot of people take that as, oh, you're just kicking them when they're down or something. It's like, no, you're rooting for business. You're rooting for all of the companies to be successful, because that's what makes wrestling hot. So the Continental Classic started on Wednesday, and you and Brian covered it, the matches and such. And I was watching it. Now, I didn't have to do a show on Thursday because it was Thanksgiving, so I didn't have to watch Dynamite through that same lens that I would normally watch it. And I was like, okay, if I was just taking notes and giving feedback based off of what I watched, like what would I, the notes that I would give? And I had two things about the Continental Classic. One, that the presentation of the Continental Classic, like if you had turned down the volume, maybe they had the belt out there or something, but like I couldn't really tell the difference between those three Continental Classic matches and normal solid wrestling on Dynamite. So that was one. And the second thing is, why didn't we get whatever the second best match of the whole tournament on Wednesday? Like that kicks off the tournament in a big way and makes you feel excited for what's coming next.
I agree, in the sense that when I watch G1, opening night is always big. You get matches that are special to kick off the tournament and get you excited, and upsets as well that make you go, oh my God, I mean, that's kind of been the key of G1 every year. And I think Tony here, I think his thing was obviously 3 heel wins. And I think the idea is that, we're going to probably come up with a lot of babyface wins at the end, build up for it, whatever it is. He's got his story to tell. I don't know what the story is, but it'll play out like I wasn't, I mean, yeah, I get the idea that we had all those heel wins on the paper, and then come back and have 3 more heel wins. But we're going to get babyface wins, as this thing goes on too. So I don't worry that much about opening day, because it's a month. You can't judge it in a vacuum of one day. But I do think that, one of those dream matches, or when you look at the thing, you should have had one matchup that you're just going to go like, this is going to be blow away on day one to kick off this thing. And we had 3 good matches, but not, none of which were blowaways in my mind.
Yeah. But that's kind of like my feeling was like, we have another opportunity. Not me, but AEW is another opportunity, to show how they're promoting something. And it just came as like, okay, like this is the matches are good, and they are all going to be more than likely, but I wanted that, like, what's unique about this year's Continental Classic? Like, what's going to make it bigger and better?
No outside interference. that's the only, and 20-minute time limits, which never factored in on, you know, and that's the other thing. They should have factored, you know, even, I mean, I know on, you know, there is a match on Collision where it does play into it, but I think on opening night, you probably want to go and have that discussion at 17 minutes and go like, oh, these guys better get their act together. Because 1 point is so much worse than 3 points. 1 point's closer to a loss than a win because 3 points is a win. So a draw is to nobody's advantage the way this tournament is, and kind of tell that story, get that story out there right away.
You should take risks more than take the draw, like to win the match.
Right, especially like you really tell that story about 15 minutes in, but we never hit 15 minutes on opening night. But that should be part of the story of, again, like, why is this different from any other week, you know? And I think that that's like part of it is they have to tell the time limit story, and also, you know, which they do emphasize the lack of interference. You know,
and can I tell you so the thing that I thought of when I saw the Continental Classic and the promotion, the Cody and Gunther match at that Crown Jewel show, I was like, why are we spending so much time building this match that is ultimately bragging rights 2.0 and is not going to mean anything? It's just going to be a good match. Like I was like, I'm seeing through all of this stuff. However, they hammered that thing home to make it important. I still don't think it was that important, but then now
they did do a storyline from that match.
Yeah, now it's a big part of Gunther's story. And
yeah, but if he wins, the story's over.
Yeah, then the story's over. But at least it created something for Priest in that moment.
It was a story that built for the next pay-per-view. Yes.
Yeah, and I was like, I wish that they would hammer this thing down, you know, like that Cody Gunther thing, which ultimately I found kind of meaningless and maybe not that important. But they still have time. We have up until the next pay-per-view, so I'm hopeful that we get some good stuff. You did some analysis on the profit loss stuff for AEW.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go through the basics. Okay, so because a lot of people are like, I don't know, you know, I mean, it's not going to make a difference, but AEW did public filings for Double or Nothing Vegas, which is one of their most expensive weekends of the year because it's Vegas, Memorial Day, you know, costs are up, and it's pay-per-view week. So they spent $3.8 million that week. So if every week, let's just say next year, 2025, if every single week they did a pay-per-view, 52 weeks a year, that would be $202 million in expenses. Okay. Obviously that's not the case. Expenses are not going to be that number. And then they may end up with more spending because of the more revenue, end up being higher next year with, you know, spending money on international growth and things like that. But that's the max that they would have spent. And it's not even the max. It's well over the number that they spent for expenses in 2024. Would be $202 million. I don't know what the number would be. You know, I mean, it's not going to be. It's less than that, and not super significantly less than that, but certainly less than that. Okay, this TV deal alone is 180. Okay, in 2023, which is last year that I have numbers, the amount of money that AEW grossed, not related to their WBD deal, was $117 million. Okay. So, you know, if you add 117 to 180, you got 297, and expenses, you're probably, you know, let's say talking 190. This is not difficult math to tell you this is going to be super profitable. Now, to do a bad case, worst case scenario, which was my point of using worst case scenario. Okay. Number one, that 117 million. First of all, or 107 million. I'm sorry, 107 million. The 107 million. First of all, take away 16 million. Okay. So you get to 91 million because that was the amount of money that they took in for the Wembley show. So we're at 91 million. Okay. And let's just say you have a really bad year and all those numbers, you know, house show, because some of this money's house shows, some of this money's pay-per-view. I mean, a lot of it significant would be the significant drivers of that money would be house shows, pay-per-view, merchandise, licensing, international television. I think those would probably be the biggest revenue streams. I might be missing something. I'm not missing a big one. So if that number take away, the England show, we're at 91 million. Let's say that bad year, you're at 60 million. Okay. So you're at, that's 240. And the other number is probably, at worst 190. So worst case scenario, we're plus 50. If they get another TV deal, if, they get some international deals next year, which by all rights they should when WWE pulls out of television, gets, whatever it is, site fee, Brisbane, site fees maybe somewhere else, things like that. That just adds to that worst case 50. And what if it's not a worst case year? I mean, I don't see a big, as far as like merchandise money, pay-per-view money, and house show money, I don't see like a big turnaround, and I do think it's going to be lower. I do think pay-per-view may go up when they get the Max deal. I do think that may happen at that point. But that's a long, long ways away, and I'm not factoring that in. But anyway, just for that thing, we're talking 50 plus, and granted, you have to pay taxes, which, again, they're lucked into this year because they're going to have a president that's going to slash their taxes. So, they're going to be paying a lot less taxes than they would have on that profit margin going in. But that's like worst case. But the idea is like, you don't know that they're going to make money. It's like, fuck. It's like, it is so painfully obvious that they will be making a lot of money. Just a question of how much is a lot. Is it going to be 50? Is it going to be 75? Are they going to get another TV deal that changes the face of that? I don't know. Okay. But I do know that it is, I mean, they would literally have to sell almost no pay-per-views, 0 tickets for the year, almost nothing on pay-per-view, almost no merchandise, to have a chance of breaking even, let alone a chance of losing money, which is it's basically impossible. So,
or buy a hotel or start a restaurant. Those are the other 2 ways that they could lose money.
Yes, he could be. he could do that, but that's not wrestling business, man. But no. Yeah. Start a bodybuilding federation. Yeah. If he does start a bodybuilding federation, with today, and all that. Yeah. But even then, he can't he can't spend that much on a bodybuilding federation. I mean, he'd have to he'd have to buy an airport or something. I don't know, but he'd have to buy something, whatever. And you know what? The other part is that I'm not really going to worry about their finances, because the reality is the profit that they make with their NFL team is gigantic. And I mean, I haven't looked up what Shad's worth is. I know what Tony's worth is, which is over $1.5 billion. You're worth $1.5 billion and you lose 10 million a year, at in a company that you're building to grow down the line. That's nothing to be concerned about. Like his losses, I mean, at first in 2018, when he's spending in 2019, more 2019, actually, he didn't spend that much in 2018. 2019, he ran very few shows, didn't get TV till October, and he was paying a lot of big contracts, to get, because he had to pay big to get Moxley and Jericho especially, Young Bucks, Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, those guys. I mean, WWE wanted, every one of them. So he had to pay big to get them, and without much money coming in. So that first year, and you don't know if it's going to be a success. There was no guarantees this would be a success. 2019, and I'm sure he was concerned. I, kind of heard certain things. So there was concern in 2019. By, once this thing started being a success in the ratings, even though they were not making a profit, it's like you could see the long term. It's like it wasn't that concerning. People were making it concerning. There was a lot of concerning signs as far as you want to keep growing your business, and sometimes things weren't always up. But TV was always healthy, and even now, I mean, the numbers are down compared to before, but as far as as compared to all of television, it's still healthy numbers. You know, I mean, all those people that were like, oh my God, they don't get $1 million. Well, they just got 555 million for 3 years, for the next 3 years, and a big bonus in year 4, unless, you know, if they stay at the level they're at right now, they'll get that big bonus in year 4. Now, if they, you know, crater, you know, I mean, it's not guaranteed. Like nothing is guaranteed past 2027. Okay. If they were to collapse, 2028 probably doesn't happen, and it's not, whatever. But, you know, where they're at right now. And again, like there's more streaming services that want live content. The Max thing, they're valuable because of Max. It's like, it's not like, I don't think many people would be deathly worried in the position that they are in, but you have to be concerned. You can't, like, I mean, some people are like, okay, let's never talk numbers. Let's not talk business ever again because they're going to make money forever. It's like, they're going to make money for 3 years. And if they don't collapse, they're going to make money for many, many years to come after that. Okay. But, you know, are the signs going up or are the signs going down? They are going down. And that has to be averted, or at least slowed to go down at well under the decline of television, and pivot. You know, of course, they are already going to be on Max. They have to be able to draw on Max enough of a number that Max is happy with it, because when that 2027 decision comes, a lot of it will be based on not just your TV ratings, but how many people are watching on Max. And again, you have to prove that. So that it is important for them to prove they can draw young viewers to Max. That's the next 3 years, but they get 3 years to prove this. So anyway, that's the situation. But yeah, like I said, like they may spend more, so the profits may not be, as worst case scenario, 50 million. It might be only 40 million for 2025 and 2026 and 2027. But guess what? That's fine too. And that's the worst. Probably will be better. They're probably going to get, as this thing goes, you know, they're probably going to get better TV internationally. I mean, most likely with WWE pulling out, they may get more TV in the United States. You know, obviously we know the Ring of Honor talks are going on, and they're serious. I've heard not a thing as far as, you know, the third show, the what used to be Rampage, because that's obviously done at the end of the year, and there's certainly no sign imminent where we're hearing anything about somebody picking it up. Not right away, certainly, because we'd know by the schedule that things would be changed. We would probably see it in house show advertising, little things that don't make sense. And it's like, oh, guess what? They got time changes or something. They got something going that they're keeping from us. There's no signs of that right now. So that's kind of where they're at.
All right. Super chat from Curtis. Interesting note on Danielson this week, wanting to avoid surgery. Do you see him returning to the company on a limited dates, part-time basis in 2025?
That's 100% based on how his neck responds to the stem cell treatment. If he can go without surgery and can heal up good enough, yes, I would expect him on some big shows in 2025. In his mind, it's like, and he's made it clear, it's like, it's not retiring, but he will not work full time going forward. If he has to have the neck surgery, it depends on the surgery that he has, but most likely, you're talking 9 to 14 months. So I would say that if he has the surgery, maybe nothing in 2025. It's going to be a long ways back. So right now, I mean, there's no answer. You know, he doesn't know, because we don't know how he'll respond to the first treatment if he can avoid the surgery. Let's get the surgery. My gut is that at best we're talking late 2025, maybe 2026.
Well, when he got hurt in what was it, 2013? What did he have?
Is that the cane injury?
Yeah, did he have like the neck surgery then, or did he take time off? I don't remember.
I don't think he had neck surgery.
Okay.
I don't think he had neck surgery, because what kept him out was the concussion thing, not the neck.
Right.
and the concussion thing was a big battle. You probably know, I'm going to guess you know more about it than all but probably a half dozen people in the world. And I probably do too. Really. But I mean, that was a tough battle, the concussion issue. He did all kinds of things, hyperbaric chamber and, a lot of things and got his way. I really thought WWE really totally like blew it in his return. I just thought there was so much in that. And, but it was, I don't know. I thought there was a lot of momentum for his comeback and, just felt like that they kind of just had the mentality that, and again, he's not aggressive when it comes to his own personal booking. But I think their mentality is like, he's injured, kind of over, so we'll use him to elevate new people. And that's fine. But that was the mentality. The mentality was never like, oh my God, we can make him a Roman Reigns. I mean, they just never had, I don't know, they ever believed that they had that there. And some people could argue, well, he never could have been. I don't know. When he was at his peak that one year, my thought is that he was on the verge of being there, but they, I think that winning the title was gigantic. And from the, that first feud with Kane just took it down, and then he got hurt, but still the plan was him to come back and Brock to destroy him.
Yeah.
The plan was never for him to be champion for 9 months.
Yeah. So you had written that after World's End, the next pay-per-view is Revolution. And then you said that Dynasty is probably on World, and that
it is on World,
and that the Brisbane show might be on Max.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know about the Brisbane show. I mean, Tony said it's not going to be a pay-per-view because of the time difference. So, but his words were, it's not going to be a pay-per-view, but everyone will have access to see it. So to me, that means probably a special on Max, but I don't know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it maybe they'll put it on YouTube. I don't know. He hasn't said what it was, but he just said that, he didn't feel it's, it would do that well. It'd be 1 a.m. Eastern, I think would be the start time. I think that's what it was. Which isn't so bad here on the West Coast because it's 10 at night. We could watch it on that night. But
yeah,
but for most of the country, it's a bad time slot. So he didn't think it was smart to do it as a pay-per-view. Plus, he's got the pay-per-view just a couple weeks later from LA.
Yeah, and if you have Dynamites being simulcasted on Max, and then you're eventually going to do pay-per-views on Max, doing that as like the test show is probably a good idea on Max as well.
Yeah. It'd be good. It'd be good to, it'd be good for that. I mean, and again, the thing is with the pay-per-views on Max, there is no, I mean, it's not going to happen until Max has pay-per-view capabilities. And like, there's no time frame for that. It's not like, on June 1st, we don't have a date, so, but I think, but pay-per-view still, it depends on the product you're giving. It's not, okay. So, people can save a few bucks on Max or whatever the price is going to end up being. That's not really what's going to make the difference. Pay-per-view is pretty much, you want to buy it, you will. If you don't, you won't, and it's up to the promotion to sell you on it, sell you on the show. But I mean, it did, like, losing Bleacher Report did hurt, I mean, it was like, my thought was like, I don't know if this is going to hurt because the people who are buying on Bleacher Report are already used to streaming. And, you can go on Triller or payperview.com or whatever, the different other ways to do it, or you can just go back to TV and do it. But it did hurt. The loss of Bleacher Report did hurt. So that didn't work out perfectly. It's not like when UFC moved from TV to ESPN Plus, I figured that was going to hurt, especially with older viewers, that they're just going to go, it's not on my TV. I don't know how to work this pay-per-view on streaming. And that actually was the case for a while until the first time Conor McGregor was on ESPN Plus. And then everyone, there's your example. Everyone figured it out because they wanted to see him. And from that point on, ESPN Plus was just fine as a exclusive venue for US pay-per-views.
It's so weird, though, that you would think. Now, I'm sure there's reasons why Bleacher Report had to go away at that time, but you think a natural progression would have been Bleacher Report, and then once Bleacher Report goes away, we're ready for Max, and the next show is on Max. It's kind of weird that it happened the way that it did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing with Bleacher Report, I think that, I mean, what else were they putting on pay-per-view? I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, I think the whole thing was just AEW, and maybe, as much as AEW is fairly successful as a pay-per-view entity, I guess it's, as far as like a monthly pay-per-view entity, I mean, obviously UFC is blown away, far, far, far the biggest. There are sporadic boxing matches that are bigger than AEW, but I think that, as far as like a monthly regular pay-per-view provider, I think AEW is number 2 in the United States, I think. And there's nobody else, is there?
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know.
boxing doesn't have monthly shows that do 100,000 buys. They have big ones.
I mean, there's boxing on Amazon Prime now, but who knows how many people buy that stuff? I've never heard anybody, except for the hardest of the hardcore boxing fans, buy stuff on there. So,
well, it's not going to be 100,000, but yeah, maybe it's just like, it just wasn't enough. Whatever. I mean, they had their reason. I don't know what it is, but obviously they made the decision. I mean, originally it was BR, and they shut down BR, and they moved to Bleacher Report, and then they shut down Bleacher Report. So, I mean, it's essentially saying that it's not a great time overall for the pay-per-view business. And in fact, that really does make the AEW success on pay-per-view even more impressive, because it really is, when so much is, like when the industry leader is, basically for free if you, subscribe to Peacock, it's like the $50 a month thing, or 9 times a year. I mean, that's a lot tougher ask than, say, in the 90s, when you're just used to, buying. I mean, during the WCW, WWF, and ECW period, it was just kind of like, man, every weekend I'm buying a pay-per-view for whatever the price was, $35. I mean, that's just what it was. Every single weekend, that is what you do. I mean, now it's kind of like, oh, my weekends, I'm going away to do this, or I'm going to go do that, and I don't really think about like every single weekend, except for a few a year. And they still had some UFCs in those days too that were on pay-per-view, but it was much harder to get. But yeah, like now it's I mean, I guess if you're a UFC fan, you're still paying $80 for monthly shows.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But it is, but they're still doing it. So
what's up with the Hammerstein ticket sales for AEW?
I mean, they're fine. They didn't like sell out immediately, but they, the way they priced, they probably weren't going to. But I mean, it's 1,400 seats. All 3 nights are going to be sold out when all is said and done. I mean, I think that for what they were doing, I mean, like, again, like, you're a promoter and you're trying to get maximum revenue. I mean, if you went in there and just said, we're going to put all seats $30, right? All 3 of those shows are going to be sold out. Snap, maybe not Ring of Honor, but the Collision and the Dynamite would have sold out instantly, because it's only 1,400 seats, and you'd have this demand, and people would go, oh my God, instant sellout. Maybe that's good for momentum. I don't know, but they didn't choose to do it that way. But they are going to sell out all 3 shows. I mean, it's, so that's, I mean, I guess that's good. And it's a question of, will it be the same fans, or will it be different fans? And if it's the same fans, by the 3rd day, which is the Dynamite taping, are they going to be tired? But, again, and this is Continental Classic stuff. The 3rd day, which is the 21st, that is essentially the final day of the Continental Classic. So all of the races, I'm sure, are going to be decided on that show on the 21st. So that's like a really big show. So will the crowd be super hot because it's a small building, as opposed to being in a big building where you have a lot of empties? I guess time will tell. We're going to learn a lot. I think these Hammerstein shows are going to tell a lot, because when they come out of that, I mean, if it's a super, super atmosphere, it may convince Tony to go in there and do 2,000 seat buildings and just pack them, as opposed to, because if you look at the schedule, it's like most of those places are 5,000 to 7,000 seats, and they're not going to pack them right now. You know, if they were hot, could they? Yeah, but they're not hot. And you know, whereas if they were running all these places with 2,000 seat buildings and had reasonably low ticket prices, they would sell all of them out still easily. So you know, just a question of how this plays out, and then how you learn from there. You know, you when it comes to like live arenas, there's a lag. I mean, like of months and months and months. I mean, you got to bump. You know, if you want to get dates, you got to book months and months in advance. So even if they learn something in December, you're probably talking about the summer before you can even implement changes based on what you learned. I think. I mean, you got everything. Basically, I'm sure everything through March is going to be done, and even probably April and May is probably done, just not announced.
So, lost in this FE and GCW and AEW thing that happened that you and Brian talked about on Wednesday was like, we still don't know what's going on with Ricky Starks. Like,
he's not booking him because you know, I mean, they suggested things, he didn't want to do them, and they think he's going to WWE when his deal's up, which it's still a long ways away. And you know, I mean, we've seen with Tony, and not everyone's like that because obviously he used Andrade, and then the other one is that well, I mean, with Jade, you know, it's like Jade didn't work for a while, then he brought her back to beat her, and then she was gone. You know, when you know, it's like, I think Tony's mentality is just like, I've got this TV time and I'm going to use people who I'm going to have, you know, rather than put people on that I'm not going to have. So I think that's probably what it is. But I mean, it's a combination of the two things. I mean, they were, you know, I mean, he was offered a program with Big Bill, you know, where he would go babyface and everything, and whatever reason, you know, that didn't happen. And yeah, they're not. I mean, it's sad in a sense. You know, Ricky Starks is 34. He's not 27. And he's getting paid great. So it's not like, oh God, you know, it's like it's cheating out of money. It's not money, but it is exposure, and he is a wrestler and a good one, and someone who wants to wants to be wrestling, and he's not wrestling.
Well, he does get dinged up every now and again, so hopefully it's allowing him a chance to fully heal.
It'll help him heal.
But here's the other thing that
here's the thing. Here's the thing, and this is from the standpoint. If he doesn't want to go to WWE, he could go to Tony right now and just let's negotiate a 5-year deal. And if he does, he'll be on TV every week. You know, they'll figure out something for him. But I think that and I'm not saying he should do that, because I don't know if that's what would make him happy. I just think that, again, with all these guys like him, I mean, they're in a good place in the sense that for now, he's going to make a good deal of money wrestling for the next several years, and provided he doesn't get hurt, because he's a good talker and good wrestler, maybe many years. And so it's a good place for him to be. And for a guy like that, you know, you got to go where you're going to be happier. And if he thinks if he thinks WWE is going to make him happier, that's where he should go. I mean, and I said for everyone, wherever you think you fit in and you're going to be happier, you're going to make money. You know, if you're a top guy, if you're a bottom guy, you don't have that leverage. If you're a top guy right now, I mean, unless there's just some great disparity of money and everything like that, I think that the idea is you really need to go where you fit in best. And for some people, it's AEW. For some people, it's WWE. And for many people, you don't know until you do it. And that's the risk of life.
Okay, but doesn't this hurt his actual leverage for WWE? WWE's like, oh, you don't want to work for AEW? Well, the whole reason why wrestlers make more money is because they position themselves in between the two companies.
Yes. The only way it would not is when the deal comes due and he makes it very clear, I'm going to the highest bidder. You know, I know they set, you know, I won't sign a new contract because I'm giving you a chance to meet my demand, and I'm interested in going there. But if you make it clear, I'm not 100% going, and they may not like that, but it's just like, I'm going to do what's best for me right now that I'm a free agent, because, you know, it's going to be 35 and a half or something when this happens. So like, as a wrestler at that age, you kind of shift from, you know what? I mean, it's like, it's time to make some money. You know what I mean?
Okay, but if you're Tony and this guy just like you guys aren't agreeing, so you're not booking him, and then when his contract comes due, he's like, "Oh, by the way, I'll re-sign with you." But then if he gets unhappy again and you do this whole dance, like I would imagine that Tony would not want to go through that again.
Tony may just go like, "We tried." Yeah. So in that sense, yeah, it could. Well, look at Pentagon. You know what I mean? I mean, Pentagon and Phoenix legitimately would have had a lot more leverage if they didn't, make it so clear they wanted to go to WWE or we're going. I mean, if their mentality is like, we are interested in going to WWE, but we are interested in staying in AEW. Number one, they'd have stayed on TV. And number two, they'd had more leverage to make a better deal with either side. By making it so clear they wanted out, they hurt their leverage. And Ricky didn't do that publicly. So with Ricky, but if it's one of those things where people think that he for sure is going and he's not considering staying, yeah, that does hurt your leverage. Sure.
It's just an interesting play to me. I don't know. I'm thinking about sort of the marketability of somebody in the brand and how I would advise somebody how to handle this scenario. It's like, oh yeah, like you should be on top in AEW and then leave to WWE if that was
if you can work it where you can get on TV and you get yourself really hot. Yeah, I mean that's the best. That's your best case scenario because WWE will want you a hell of a lot more because you're hot and it looks like they've taken somebody hot. And AEW, of course, will want you a lot more because you don't want to lose a hot guy to the other side. So yeah, that would be for if you're Ricky Starks. Yeah, that's the place to be. And I mean, the whole key is that Tony doesn't want to put him in that place.
Well, then
there's your answer.
Yeah, and what Tony wants to play defense against is the Cody Rhodes situation. Is hand delivering somebody over to WWE who creates
and CM Punk. Look, yeah. Ricky Starks will, but everyone, like Ricky Starks will show up in week one, the place is going to go completely nuts, and then it's just a matter of momentum. But guess what? CM Punk and Cody Rhodes, that momentum lasted a while. And it's still there, 1 year for Punk and several years for Cody, it's still there. So if I was like, I mean, Ricky's not as big a star as they are, but he's a big enough star and a good enough talker. And, he's got a good act that will play well in WWE most likely.
Yeah.
Especially now, if it was Vince, if it was Vince's WWE, I wouldn't be as sure, but with the Levesque WWE, I'm pretty confident. Yeah.
All right. Before we get to Survivor Series, what's the Kenny Omega update?
I mean, he's wrestling January 5th. He's just try, see where he's at. He's been through hell, I mean, physically and everything like that. And, first match is going to be very interesting. I mean, obviously, though, the long term is the hope so that he's full time in AEW. As soon as possible, but we just don't know how he's going to feel after match one, and it's going to be he's got to test himself on what he feels that he can do and what his body can hold up, and so I think that's pretty much where we're at right now. Is just to wait and see.
All right, Survivor Series is Saturday, early start time. Do we even know why it's 3:00 on the at least Pacific?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it is. I mean, when they moved from 8 to 7, I got it because it's like the idea is like, well, let's say we go long, we'll still be done by 11. That's cool, you know what I mean? But I don't know why you would move from 7 to 6. Even if you have if this may be a longer show. Because you got those two war games and they're both going to go over a half hour, most likely. I mean, Levesque's war games usually are like 40 minutes and plus. So you've got that. And then you've got, the Gunther match probably should be 20. And the other match is not necessarily as long, but still not short. So maybe that's part of it is that just do, maybe he's going to try to do a 4-hour show instead of a 3. And maybe that's it. I mean, like, it's not like often the last time they moved early was because UFC was the same night. But this one, there's no UFC that night, so there's no UFC this weekend. So I think it's maybe it's just that they're playing on a longer show, and they still want to be done by 10ish.
All right. So the show features the men's war games, which I don't know, man. I was watching SmackDown on Friday night, and my first thought was when they announced Punk won, I was absolutely surprised. Like, it was a great surprise.
Yeah, it was a great surprise. It came out of nowhere, but it was a good come out of nowhere.
Right. And the second thought was, oh man, they probably now I don't know if they did it this way or not, but I was like, oh, they definitely wanted SmackDown to have some momentum going into Saturday's AEW show, or just the news of that Punk thing. Because it was a great moment. It was just like, of course, this is the right guy. You have Paul Heyman. Now, I hope they tell that story, because the last we saw was Roman Reigns got a disconnected cell phone number. But
that's what tonight's show's about.
Yeah, I was just like, wow, that was great. These War Games matches, I feel like the idea of a War Games match and like the culmination of a feud, the whole idea of it is great. And then when I watch the War Games matches, I'm always slightly disappointed, because it's not the same War Games matches back in the day. It's just a different kind of match.
It's never, the time is different. It's never going to be. No, these are okay. The good War Games was they would build up this rivalry between the two sides, and finally you go into War Games. Okay. This War Games it's Thanksgiving week. We need 10 guys. What are we going to do? And it's a big difference. And so you just kind of throw things in. Now, the Bloodline versus Bloodline has been building up for months. You could see this one coming for a long, long time. I mean, you didn't see Punk part of it, but you certainly saw the Usos, Roman, and probably. I mean, I remember before anyone ever said anything. My thought is, it was basically like Usos, Roman, Sami Zayn, and Kevin Owens against the 4 guys they got now, and then I figured Hikuleo's coming in as number 5. And nobody told me anything. This was just my guess. Hikuleo hasn't come in yet. They didn't use Kevin Owens, but you're pretty much, that's what it was. The women's that's just shit thrown together. There's just, we're going to do a women's War Games because we have to. But the men's War Games actually has been built up for months.
Yeah. So what comes out of this, do you think? Because what are they trying to set up? We're not really ready for WrestleMania season quite yet, but last year at Survivor Series, CM Punk shows up, so that was a big thing. I imagine they want another big hook coming out of this show, and I'm trying to think, what is that? Do you think? Can you sense that there's anything that's coming out of this?
I'm sure there's something coming out of the War Games. I just don't know what. I mean, look.
Cody's not in on the show, actually, right?
Right. Because they're holding him off for Saturday's main event. So, they still could do something. There's a lot of things they could do, but as far as maybe doing something, I've got to think that Roman versus Solo and Roman versus Jacob are matches that are going to be coming up. Maybe one at Mania, but then there's another one as well.
What about Roman and Punk though?
Like,
could there be some Paul Heyman scenario where Roman and Punk are a big match coming out of big match next year sometime?
Yeah, I would think down the road. Put it this way: when Punk came in, he came in for a match with Seth Rollins for WrestleMania. Obviously, it didn't happen. Everyone knows why. Okay, that was the plan, and Roman was absolutely a plan. Way later down the line. Of course, those plans change a million times, but I've got to think that there's a good chance that, maybe 2026, maybe late 2025, that you could be there. Yeah.
I think Roman and Solo is fine. It's like we've seen them in the ring together. I don't think that,
but they have to do a singles match.
They have to finish the grudge, whatever that is. Roman and Jacob is a different story. I think that could be really intriguing and fantastic. But I think Roman and Punk is a giant thing. So I wonder if we get a little
Yeah,
bit
but
of
there's still Roman and Rock and Roman and Cody too. Like Roman's, and Roman doesn't wrestle much. Roman's probably got his next 2 years already like laid out for him. I
yeah.
mean, so yeah, because obviously Rock and Roman is a match that they've always wanted to do. Rock and Punk is a match that's on the table and can be done. Rock and Cody, I mean, they had their problems in that tag match and they did that spot, for the reason of it's something to do down the line. I just don't know when. Maybe it's a backup if Dwayne's not doing Mania, But my gut is that they don't want to do Rock and Cody 3 straight Manias. That they would if Rock is not doing the Cody match, that I don't know that they would go to the Roman and Cody would be the easy one, but I think they would just go, we've done it. We've done it. Let's have a break and do it later. I mean, I could be dead wrong on that. Like I have not spoken to one person about what happens if Rock is not wrestling Cody at Mania. And nobody would tell me at this stage anyway. We'll know, like in January, I think that we'll be able to see. I think when it comes to WrestleMania, I think that the first Netflix show, whatever happens in the first Netflix show, will tell us. We may get a hint at Survivor Series, but I think that we'll probably get the big hint at the first Netflix show.
San Jose is Netflix show number 2.
Oh, I sure do. I sure do know that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. I hope to go to that show. I mean, I don't imagine it's going to look all that different, but I think they've done really good business in San Jose of late, so I expect that thing to be pretty hot.
Well, they'll do well. I mean, every Raw does well. I mean, they never really have what I would call a bad house. I don't know that they'll sell it out, but I mean, like right now, it's not tracking like that. But I think that with the momentum and the Netflix and everything like that, I think there's a pretty good shot of selling that one out. Yeah.
So when you were doing the odds in the Observer, the one that kind of surprised me was Nakamura was the favorite over LA Knight.
Yeah, I mean, it surprised me a little bit too. I think that maybe it's just time, and it's not a lock that means Nakamura is going to win, but maybe it's time. I don't know. I mean, I feel Knight has cooled off. I mean, he still gets good reactions, but it's not like what it was, a year ago.
Yeah.
A year ago. I mean, I remember a year ago, that guy was hot as hell. And, his segments would do big numbers and everything. Now he's legitimately, he still gets a pop, but his segments don't move numbers or anything anymore. And so maybe it's time to put him on the chase. I don't know. Yeah. And there's maybe they want to I don't know. Yeah, I was a little surprised. I don't know that I'm expecting a championship change, but when I saw those odds, it was kind of like, yeah, you know what? I mean, LA Knight has cooled off. Maybe it's time to change the script a little bit.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's just to change a title because Gunther's a heavy favorite. I think
ridiculous favorite.
It would make sense for Braun Breaker to keep his title, and so then that leaves that match as the possible title switch.
But they may do the feel good for Sheamus, but I don't feel this week that story's been told well. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's the time to do it because they have told the story, but not hard. That Sheamus has won every single championship but the Intercontinental. And the one thing with the 3-way is that you can protect Braun in the finish, but I don't know, just the way the build's been, I don't feel it. I just feel that it's like Kaiser's there to lose, and then you go back to Braun and Sheamus. I think, yeah.
What is this Jade story?
It's a good question.
It's so crazy.
I mean, last night, somebody from there, that I'd asked around about said absolutely injured. I mean, everyone on Twitter is going like, she's not. I mean, I got something from someone, but I don't know if it's accurate. Long involved story. I don't want to talk about it because, but it was someone saying that she's not hurt. I got that a couple of days ago, but it wasn't from somebody that I knew. Mm-hmm. And if it plays out the way the person said, then I'll know that, it played out. We'll know soon enough on that. But the person who I know who was going to know said, no, whatever anyone's telling you, she is hurt, So there you go. I mean, I did bring up the scenario and got no response as far as that scenario itself. He's like, is this scenario where they're going? I got no response. So it could be.
So there was a thing that you had mentioned some weeks back about how, maybe WWE was trying to spread some information to see who picks it up, and it was not the right information, but it was like the story that they wanted.
The Kevin Owens story?
Is that what it was? Yeah. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Is this a similar situation, or is this just?
I don't think so. So. But I mean, the Kevin Owens thing, I never bought that either, because the thing with the Kevin Owens situation is that, okay, I didn't report it because nobody would confirm it, but it's like when that came out, it's like WWE knew I knew. Okay, they knew I knew because I'd asked, specifically. They knew I knew, so they wouldn't tell me. So it's like, why would you plant something to someone they already knew? Like, I wasn't going to be sitting there writing, "Oh, Kevin Owens is a free agent," because I pretty much knew that he'd signed. So that story, like when I read it, made no sense. But here's the other thing: when it comes to all these stories, is the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, could someone have been doing that, not knowing that I knew? Yes, they could have been. I don't know. And it's not. I can't spend my time thinking about like that. It's kind of like the whole thing's a waste of time. But when if they perceive this as that important, maybe they would do that. So I don't know.
So then Saturday night's main event, we have Cody and KO. And what else is on that show as of right now? Because that show's in what?
Just the women's,
weeks,
the U.S.
right?
The U.S. women's title final.
Okay.
I think it's too soon to get to the Intercontinental title final. That might be a little bit later because they're starting that tournament next week. So maybe they could get it to there.
2 women's mid-card title final matches on the same show.
Yeah. They'll probably be at least something that comes out of a Saturday show that would build to the Saturday night's main event. And then they're going to go heavy on the nostalgia. I think
the music and all that stuff too.
The music and probably bringing back some old stars. Yeah. Yeah.
And what's the story with Jesse?
This was, I had asked about Jesse, it feels like months ago, and I was told on the show, at least at that point, he was on the show. And I said he's going to announce the whole show, and it was like, probably not. I don't think that they want him to do, like a 2-hour announcing thing, but maybe they will. Maybe he'll announce one match. Maybe he'll do a skit. I don't think it was even determined past the idea of, yeah, Jesse'd be a good guy to have on the first show, but probably not to announce 2 hours. Then again, if they, I don't know, who knows. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know more. I was told Jesse a long time ago, though, that at that point he was planned to be on the show in some form and not announcing the whole show. Could that have changed 15 times? Yeah, of course. And it will. And from 2 months ago to now, it probably, of course it was going to change 15 times because that's wrestling.
Anything else on Netflix?
No, other than I think that the first show is going to, tell us a lot about WrestleMania. And I feel it's going to do great numbers. I feel they should shoot the biggest angle of the year there because more people are going to watch week 1 than any other week. That's just the nature of the beast.
Do you have a viewership prediction?
Let's see, worldwide, we're going to get a worldwide number. And so that's not really, conducive. I mean, I think way over, put it this way, I think way over 2 million US.
Mm-hmm.
I think way over 2 million. Yeah.
Interesting. And I'm interested to see also the power of the algorithm, because I imagine if you watched 1 second of the Vince McMahon documentary, when you flip on Netflix that evening, they're going to push Raw at you.
Yeah, but the Vince documentary is not doing giant numbers now.
No,
But
I'm
it's still
just saying
doing.
in the history of, if you've ever watched the Vince,
Yeah.
they have that data, and they're going to be like, oh, we're going to feed them Raw immediately when they turn the app on.
That is a great idea. I'm sure that they will do it. And I think that they'll probably, people still, I mean, I know two people this week who contacted me that watched the Vince documentary this week. I mean, because they told me, so I know that people are still watching. It's not top 10 anymore.
Yeah.
But it's still being viewed and will be viewed. Yeah, I think if anyone views it from this point on, I mean, I think Netflix should be pushing the hell out of January, that date. Was it January 6th, right?
Well, the interesting thing for me is I don't have a way to watch Raw at 5:00 unless I go into like the USA app. I think I can do it. So I'm definitely going to just throw it on. I may not watch the whole show live, but I'm definitely going to throw it on at 5 just to see what's going on, because I'm very intrigued about and also I just want to see how it works, and whether or not they have any troubles. I don't think they're going to have much trouble with the signal.
Well, they're gonna. The one thing that they're really lucky about is they had the Tyson fight, and they're gonna have the NFL games. So if there's going to be trouble, those are the shows there's going to be trouble, because obviously Raw's numbers will be minuscule compared to the NFL games and compared to the Tyson fight. So they've already,
the Puck, the Matt Bellany's website.
Yes,
they did a buyer's guide thing, like a little fun thing where all of their authors wrote about some gimmick or product or whatever. And so John Oran's thing for people to pay to watch or buy or whatever was the Vince McMahon documentary. That was his suggestion to everybody.
Really? And did he say anything special about it, or just?
No, I mean, he just had a little write up on it about why.
Yeah. I had some ideas about that, actually. I just keep forgetting them.
All right. So last couple things here. I saw a note about. I only know him as Tiger Chung Lee, but
Kim Duck.
There's an illness related.
Kim Duck, liver cancer. Yeah. Really sad. I just heard that. I think he just got diagnosed that in the last couple of days. But yeah, 76 years old. I mean, I've been watching him since I was a kid, because he came to Los Angeles. I forget the year, but it was early 70s, and he was going to come to San Francisco. They were going to do Kinji Shibuya, and Kim Duck, who was going to be called, I think, Mr. Taguchi, which is his name. His name's Masanori Taguchi. Because Kinji Shibuya did an interview talking about, like, he's bringing, Masa Saito was gone by this point. He goes, I'm bringing in, Mr. Taguchi. And I go, that's Kim Duck, And he might have come in, like, I think he may have come in just for a battle royal, but he never came in as a regular. I'd have to look this up. But so that, but I was very young when this was all going on. But I mean, I remember, Kim Duck and Kentaro Oki, with Baba and Saruta in the mid 70s, All Japan, trading that tag team championship back and forth, and their famous match in Seoul, South Korea, which everyone in South Korea watched. And when I say everyone, I'm not exaggerating. It was 80. It did an 88 rating. I mean, you figure the Super Bowl maybe does a 50. I mean, that tells you something. It's like everyone in the country. And it was, Kentaro Oki, was just a super national sports hero. He's kind of forgotten now, but in the 60s and 70s was a giant sports hero, the sports hero of South Korea. And Kim Duck was his tag team partner. But I mean, like, here, he worked, all kinds of territories. A funny one is that Kurt Brown, who's a very good friend of mine for decades and decades, the first wrestling match he ever saw, I believe, or on the first card he ever went to, there was a match with Kim Duck against Colosso Colosetti, which is interesting this week. He had years as Tiger Chung Lee. He was kind of a guy who was, be the guy in the tag match who didn't do the job. or sometimes do the job on TV. I mean, he was never given any real push. Sometimes he teamed with Fuji and they would lose, and stuff, no real push, but, big guy, decent enough wrestler. He was, I mean, he was a star in Japan, but not a superstar in Japan. Obviously a big star at one point in Korea. Yeah. South Korea, where he's from. I think he grew up in Japan actually, but he was always billed from South Korea. And I think I don't know if it's South Korean ancestry or South Korean by birth, but he was always pushed as Korean in Japan. I believe when he wrestled in California, he was pushed as Japanese. That's my memory of it. I don't remember them pushing him being from Korea. In WWF, he was pushed from Korea.
And then Matt and Jeff re-signed with TNA.
Well, this perfect example is like, I think that they're making moves that they're going to have fun with, and, like, I don't think that WWF at this stage of the game was going to do anything with them. And AEW, they were there. And at the stage of the game, they weren't going to do anything with them either. So TNA, they're big stars. They can make a difference. So it's the right place for them. So, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world.
All right. I think we probably have time for one question. So what's the best one that I have? Actually, we'll just ask a quick one because you may know this, you may not. But because he writes for the website, Ryan Howard does some live coverage for us. He wanted to know if the current situation with the Cavender twins and their association with WWE.
Nothing. I mean, nothing at all. My perception of that from day one was that they would expect far more money than WWE would offer them as untrained wrestlers, and that they would never make a deal. And I know that there was a point where they were negotiating, their agent was negotiating with WWE, and I never heard anything. And I always assumed that I don't know if that's how it turned out, but I always figured because they were making so much money, but I don't see like WWE, going this regime, offering them like, $500,000 each just to try it. You know what I mean? Like Vince did with Brock Lesnar, but that was special. You know what I mean? And they did with Mark Henry, but he was coming out of the Olympics, and the mentality was very different then too. And I think when Kurt won the gold medal, they offered him that. But when Kurt actually came in, because he turned him down, if you remember, when Kurt came in, he came in for far less than that, because their basic feeling was, well, people forgot about your gold medal. Now go prove it, and all that. And he did. So, and they were making a lot of money. I think that one of them went back to college basketball this season, right? I think
maybe both of them did. I don't.
I mean, they were real big at Fresno, but when they went to Miami, I think one of them didn't play much. The other one played and was all right, but wasn't like a superstar. I mean, like, I hear nothing about them at all. It was like, some people are like, really, they have that, they're hot for a year and then people move on and somebody else is hot for a year. And I have heard like nothing about them. And I used to hear about them from my basketball friends, that followed women's college basketball, but I haven't heard anything about, I haven't looked anything up on them. So I don't really know, but I'd always figured it'd be a stretch. Plus, I don't know, like, again, if you're just someone who's like a celebrity and you're looking for something to do, I'm not sure WWE is it, because WWE is so hard physically. I mean, the only reason you would do WWE is because you just freaking love it. Because there's no other reason if you can make money elsewhere.
The other thing is for these folks who are interested in being influencers, you can kind of be more, you have a better chance of being an influencer on your own than getting your name changed in WWE, and like
100%.
Just stick doing what you're doing. You don't need WWE to do any of that stuff.
Right. And if their goal is just to be that, then yeah, what does WWE offer? And even if you do go there, then yeah, they're going to change your name and they're going to own you.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you really want, if you're making money on your own, do you really want them to own you? So it's not, I didn't think it was a good fit. The only way it would have been a good fit was if WWE had gone in there and just said, oh my God, they're so marketable. We're going to make it work. We're going to offer them a ton of money and we're going to make them like the biggest superstars in the world because they just got it. And I don't see them doing that with people who are unproven, because in wrestling, and I think that, one of the things is that's going to make them even more cautious is Gable Steveson, because they did offer Gable Steveson a ton of money and it didn't pan out. So now I think that they're going to be, and he was a gold medalist who could do flips and blah, 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 because there's no way to know how you translate. I remember when Gable Steveson was a junior in high school, and it was like, oh my God, WWE superstar, blah, blah, blah. And it's from people in WWE, brisk, they knew of him. They knew, another Brock Lesnar thing. And it obviously didn't remotely pan out. And so I think that, like, I don't see them making that kind of an offer or that kind of a mental commitment to anyone. I think that it's kind of like, if you want to do it, I'm sure they would have gone to, there's a certain number they would go to that's probably higher than what almost anyone starts in NXT at, but it's not going to, but is that number going to be high enough for them who are making far more on endorsements than that money? It's probably no, so I think that's, I mean, unless those two just like dead set want to be pro wrestlers from children, and it's like just in their blood and everything like that. They never thought it was a good fit to get that signature done.
All right. Actually, since these are kind of new-ish, there are two quick Hall of Fame questions. First one is from Jose. Do you think there's anybody that can use Stardom's recent success as part of their resume to get into the Hall of Fame? It feels strange to think that a women's promotion maintaining a spot as one of Japan's stronger promotions for multiple years won't have someone who represents them, and it seems like Rossi has fallen out of favor with a lot of people.
I mean, the one who's the strongest would be Mayu Iwatani, but the one who would probably get the most votes is Io Shirai. She'll be on the ballot. I mean, it's weird. I don't know how the Japan ballot's going to be, but I do believe that I think Japan and Mexico, it's become, I don't know, like when I saw what Shima getting in it, it felt like Japan maybe has gotten easy, as easy it could be for Hall of Fame, because it's never going to be easy, but easier. And Mexico, I thought that last year with the Villanos, that it's gotten easier. But yeah, I mean, put it this way: if Michael Satomura was never really Stardom. I mean, the strongest candidate, if we're just going Stardom, would right now be Mayu Iwatani, who's a hell of a wrestler. She's really great, but I don't see her. She's not that big of a star in Japan to be like Hall of Fame level. It's not like Dump Matsumoto. You know what I mean? Like that's like she was a real star. By the way, how much of the Dumps thing have you seen?
I'm still stuck on episode 3. I have not gone back to watch the rest of it.
I think I'm on episode. I think I'm on episode 4 now. It's like as it goes longer, it's become harder for me because it's become the Iron Claw to me.
Yeah.
I know this, and this didn't happen, and this didn't
Right.
happen, and this didn't happen. But
probably benefits if you don't know the story.
Right. But I actually think that like watching it, it's a pretty freaking great show.
Yeah, it's very well done.
Like so well done, and some parts of it are really interesting to me. The stuff like again like the interpersonal stuff with Jaguar and Linus Asuka and just different things that developed. I mean, like again, I don't know what I should probably actually when I finish this, I should probably try to do a show with Fumi on that.
Yeah,
on that series.
You definitely should.
Yeah, because now he wasn't like a giant. I'm trying to remember when I went there in the 80s. I don't remember like when I went there in the 90s. Fumi was at the shows and Fumi knew everybody. I mean, certainly, I mean, like from the Medusa era on, Fumi, when it comes to Japanese women's wrestling, like all in, knows everything type of thing. I'm not sure in the Crush Gals era that he did. He may. It's just funny. It's just something like he's aware of it. He has knowledge of it, but I don't know how deep. It might be super deep. I mean, I know like when I would go to Japan, like 1990, and socialize and hang out with Fumi. It's like he knew everything about Japanese women's wrestling, like everything. But I don't know if he did in like 83, 84. I mean, he knows the history. Like I know the history, but there's like a lot of stuff like as far as that show, like I know the historical inaccuracies, but there's backstage stuff that I didn't know. Like, I mean, like Chigusa and Dump were legitimately good friends at the start, and were, because they were made rivals, legitimately became rivals. Were kind of manipulated into becoming rivals. And some of the stuff about, like trying to get back on primetime TV and the station, believing that Dump was such a key, that's all true. And one of the reasons, like there was the mandatory retirement age of 25, and Dump was allowed to stay until I'm going to say 27, 28, but that rule was somehow dropped for Dump because she was that important of a character, which, like they didn't drop it for Jackie Sato and they didn't drop it for Chigusa Nagayo. So that told the thing. And I also remember, you know what? I do remember having conversations with Fumi, certainly by 87. So you know what? He probably does know that, because I remember 87 having, learning a lot from Fumi about certain things that were going on behind the scenes with All Japan Women. So, he was in the US a lot too, and before that, but yeah, he would know everyone, yeah, I actually think that, I'm actually like pretty interested in that now that I watch it, of like, okay, what the behind the scenes stuff,
Yeah, I think I'd asked you, like, if as this series has kindled some interest in that time period, like what's the best information? I think you said you have some yearbook articles on some of that stuff from
I did a big article.
Retired, right?
I did the Chigusa. I did a yearbook story on the Chigusa Nagayo retirement. That was pretty much in depth. And I covered the Crush Gals, which is a lot because of Brody and Terry Funk, really. I mean, not probably 100%. Because I told you the story that that the Fuji network used to be on our cable in San Jose, like in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And
was that have been Gil Cable or even before Gil Cable?
It might have been Gil Cable.
Okay.
Yeah, but whatever it was in the early 80s. Do you remember the sports channel that they had where they would air like the wrestling and the roller derby and stuff? I don't know if you
remember the sports channel. I don't know if it's,
but they would air like the women's volleyball, and they would air the soccer, and like basically all the sports in San Jose. They had like I forgot the guy's name. I knew the guy too. I bumped into him around town all the time, and I think he was a wrestling fan too. That was their play-by-play guy for all the sports. Like he would do every sport, and he was pretty cool. I knew him from the Earthquake Soccer for sure.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, that's where I probably knew most of the sports people in those days. Anyway, getting away from that, the Fuji network aired, so it was on, and I would watch it because I was a wrestling fan, and it was great, but it was like, I don't know how to explain it. It was like I didn't get hooked on it because it was too good. You know what I mean? It was like too good. This like doesn't compute. It like, I mean, it's kind of like, I think when people's blocks on like Will Ospreay or something, I mean, that's why when they have that block, I go, hey, I get it. You have this thing. This is what wrestling is. This is what wrestling's supposed to look like. And now you see these people that are like so much better, and you just don't want to accept it. It's like, I went through that. So I get it. And so I didn't really, like, I knew the results and things, and I followed that. But when I went to Japan in 84, Brody and Terry were just like, and plus I'm going around town and I'm seeing these freaking posters of the Crush Gals, outside of every record store, you know what I mean? You see it everywhere. You can see they're big freaking cultural figures. Okay. So I don't think on my 84 trip, I did not go to one women's wrestling show on that trip, which is stupid, but whatever. Because I just didn't have the affinity for it. And they were telling me like they're better than the guys. Jaguar Yokota is better than any guy wrestler. She's better than any guy wrestler. They would tell me that. So it was kind of like, okay, I guess I got to pay attention to Jaguar Yokota, and I got to start paying attention to the Crush Gals. So I started getting the tapes, and it was like, oh my God, right? Like I saw that Lioness Asuka and Jaguar Yokota match. If you want to look it up, I mean, you watch that thing in 84 or 85, whatever year that match was, it's kind of like, oh my God, if I didn't think it computed in 1982, now they're like way better. But I have to accept it because, those guys told me you better learn it or you're going to be out of touch. So I got to learn it. And then it was just like, from that point on, it's like, fuck, this is incredible. And I remember just like showing people, and like everybody that would see it was just like, what the fuck? It's like they'd never seen anything like that in that era. So, and then the JB Angels a couple years later came to WWE, and they were better than anything that was there. It was just incredible too. So I was like that's how I guess started getting into it. So I saw like the tail, like I didn't see the rise of the Crush Gals, but I saw the peak of the Crush Gals, and then when they split up and everything, and then Jagusa and everything. And I did see them live in '87 when I went, and oh my God, was that an experience? I mean, it was like the loudest crowd, even louder than freaking going to Dallas, during the Kerry Von Erich days. That crowd was so loud. I mean, it was loud. It was, in a sense, it's louder than Hogan, but in a sense, it's not, because Hogan would be in front of 15,000 people at the Cow Palace or the Oakland Coliseum, and it was loud as hell. And this is, 1,800 people at Cork, but it's because it's all, teenage girls, and they're screaming so loud. I mean, it's just like, oh, this is crazy. And it was incredible, like atmosphere, and when I was watching the show, because I just watched this last week since I got back from Hawaii. We went and we were behind on this. Let's catch up on this. So I watched, I think it's episode 3 and maybe 4. I watched 2 episodes, and it was like really nostalgic to me, because it was like, okay, I actually lived through this now. Now we're like the training stuff was just like watching. I knew who the characters were. It's like, oh, they're Yukari Omori. I know who this is, or whatever. But this one is like, okay, when they had the Crush Gal singing, their song, it's like I actually saw this when it was happening. So then it became like really like, oh, this is like my, I wasn't a child. I was 24 years old. But it's like, I remember this really well when I was younger and I first discovered these people, and yeah, this is the crowd and this is the atmosphere. And it really was like this. So there was a level of authenticity of the atmosphere that is 100% real. Yeah.
All right. Last one. I've seen Darius in some other chats ask this question before. Thoughts on Dick Ebersol as a Observer Hall of Fame candidate?
That's an interesting one, but I was going to say no. He was important for Saturday Night's Main Event, and I guess didn't he convinced Vince to do the Royal Rumble. So I mean that's important. I just don't feel it. I mean, it's like Ted Turner had the station and owned a company. Dick Ebersol, he did work with Vince McMahon. Getting on NBC was a big freaking deal, no doubt about it. So I mean, maybe he should be on the ballot, but I don't like if Ted Turner's not in, and he may end up in, then at least
I think Ted's going to end up in.
Yeah, I do too. So maybe I'm not as sold, but it's like there's an argument there. Yeah, there's an argument.
Yeah, in Ebersol's book, he said Randy Savage would call him the next day after Saturday Night.
To get the ratings.
Yeah, to get the overnights.
That there's what's funny about that? I'm not going to mention any names, but I will tell you that when it came to that, there were certain wrestlers, obviously, who would call me in those days to get the ratings. And you know, the thing that was always interesting to me is it was only the top guys.
Mm.
And I started, you know, and I even at that point, it's like, maybe this is why they're the top guys.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Because it's like the ones who, I mean, the ones who really wanted that insight, you know, are, you know what I mean? And wanted, you know, and, you know, some of them, you would ask me like real detailed stuff, really wanting to learn. And it's funny because, you know, like in almost every case, they were the top guys. It's like never heard from middle guys. I don't say never. I mean, this conversation absolutely come up, but not like calling on Tuesday. How'd my quarter do? Where, you know, how to do with this demo and all that. There were only a few people like that, very few, but man, they were like the top guys. And I never made that connection until right now completely. So interesting.
All right, good way to end. You and Bryan will be up after Survivor Series, but depending on when he gets back from traveling, could be later than usual, but it'll be up for folks on Sunday. And, you know, like we mentioned, the Black Friday deals, you can do the Apple Podcasts one, which is you get a few days free to sample it before you actually have to go in and buy it. f4wonline.com/Apple. That is just all the podcasts that we do on this network in that feed. And then the Black Friday deal for a half price month one on this website. Just go to account.f4wonline.com/sign up. And the code is Black Friday. All right. So that is it. You guys will be back, and then you and I will be back again next week. But for Dave, I am Garrett. To everybody, thanks for watching and listening.